in that particular position.
Yeah, do you expect to have an email to one person made public by them because, and you can understand why it was offensive, it wasn't a funny joke, but just because they are offended by a bad joke?
I find these days that people are really serious about their food beliefs, aren't they? There almost develops religious kind of connotations around how they follow them passionately, so you have to be careful. And a lot of comedians normalise people like vegans these days as well. So this guy probably thought he was well within his rights. Even, I remember Gordon Ramsay got into trouble, didn't he, too, with PETA, where he said PETA stood for people eating tasty animals or something like that. So
you're right about vegans being the target of comedian jokes, aren't you?
Yeah, well, maybe, this guy just thought, well, it's kind of, it has been normalised, and he was inappropriate, though.
I read this week that our Governor-General is vegan. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
But on the issue of the emails...
Yes, that's what I was going to ask you.
I see a lot of people who are dismissed for sending inappropriate emails or, in particular, posting things on Facebook expecting that that's going to be kept private. But the reality is that you can't guarantee that anything's going to be kept private these days. So anything that you write down, you can expect to be presented in evidence against you, is my thought.
Okay, so just to reiterate, treat emails as you would a general post on Facebook.
Yep, and even text messages. So employers can and do go back through employees' text messages when looking at potential disciplinary issues, and people text the most outrageous things.
If they have a law degree, Susan, says Carolyn Mooney of Tauranga, they are indeed your learned colleagues.
Well, yes.
Carolyn may be a lawyer.
Technically speaking, learned. Learned again is a relative term.
The odd lime scooter, before we go, seems to have caught fire in the United States, so there's been a partial recall of them there. More seriously, 3 people died on e-scooters, not necessarily limes, last month, and now there's a class action lawsuit underway by accident victims. Before we go, we've talked so much about this, but if they could be written on roads, where are the helmets? Do you think this? What's your view here?
When I first saw them scooting around in Auckland in Labour weekend, my gut feeling was, that's dangerous. And, there are different ways to ride these vehicles, but when you see young teenage kids treating them as kind of parkour vehicles and pulling them up and down gutters, you just go, nah, this is going to end very poorly for people. And you see some responsible using, but again, I think you have to protect people in some way.
Susan, what do you reckon? Yeah,
look, totally agree. Some of these things are out of control. I saw 3 guys hooning along the road on them, and I think they go a lot faster than a bike could potentially. And in any event, a bike's more within your control because you're powering the thing. But I think it's bizarre that you don't have to wear helmets when riding out electric scooters.
I think NZTA and the councils have decided that requiring a helmet impedes the micro-mobility of them. You can't just hop on one on a whim, ride it a couple of blocks and then leave it somewhere.
Well, how do they handle those cycles, though, that people just pick up and then cycle and then drop? I mean, it's the same question, and we'll need to figure out an answer because I think the safety has to come first.
Yeah. Be interesting to see if the policy survives the head injuries. All right, thank you. Susan Hornsby-Gallagher's been on the panel today. Thank you, Susan.
Thanks, Joe.
And kia ora, Mike. Thank you for your company too.
Yeah, that passed quickly, didn't it?
It did, actually. The hour zipped by as fast as an e-scooter. That's us. Thanks for your company. We're back tomorrow, everybody, and here is Checkpoint.
Ki te whakarongo mai koe ki te reo irirangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint. I'm Lisa Owen. On tonight's program, the Immigration Minister launches an investigation into the residency of the convicted drug smuggler Carol Schrubeck. Tourism New Zealand launches a campaign for travellers to act as guardians of New Zealand. But what is the Tiaki promise? We ask Minister Calvin Davis, and we go to Auckland Airport to ask tourists what they make of it. Rising fuel prices bring a disappointing half-year result for Z Energy, and women across the country say they are using rags, socks and toilet paper or skipping school because they can't afford sanitary products. A Cromwell GP fears lives could be put in danger when the only after-hours urgent medical care service in central Otago shuts up shop tonight.
RNZ News at 5. Kia ora, good afternoon. Ko Katrina Batanaho. The National Party is rubbishing a newly announced investigation into a Czech drug smuggler's case, saying the Immigration Minister needs to act quickly. Ian Lees-Galloway has been under pressure over his decision to grant Karel Schrubeck residency, allowing him to stay in New Zealand and avoid deportation. The minister says he's since heard fresh serious allegations about the case and has ordered immigration officials to look into them. He says he expects to hear back within 3 weeks, but the National MP Mark Mitchell says that's ridiculous.
He should be reporting back by the end of the week. He should have all the information that he needs and coming back reporting to the people of New Zealand tomorrow, Friday.
Mark Mitchell says the minister must reverse his decision. The Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern, says it's clear the country has failed to deal with suicide and depression. She was visiting Porirua East, north of Wellington, to announce a major housing project. The suburb has been rocked by 6 suicides since June, mostly of young people. Ms Ardern says the high rates of harm show mental health services have not coped.
It's clear we're failing. It's clear. We know we need to do better. You know, we've started by rolling out services in schools. We're waiting for a bit of feedback from the mental health inquiry.
Jacinda Ardern says the government's committed to coming up with a plan. The National Suicide Prevention Strategy lapsed in 2016 and has not been replaced. The $1.5 billion housing plan announced today includes 2,900 refurbished and new state houses and at least 2,000 affordable Kiwi-build and market-priced homes. It's a partnership with local iwi Ngāti Toa. A man who killed his 2-year-old daughter will be freed on parole after 14 months in prison. Esme Kinraid suffocated when her father, Philip Murray Kinraid, forced her face into a pillow when she wouldn't settle at bedtime in June 2015. Kinraid was sentenced to 4 years and 3 months in prison for manslaughter in September last year. He became eligible for parole in July. The parole board says Kinraid has made exemplary progress in counselling and is now considered low risk. It says he has a new partner, approved accommodation and strong family support. Kinraid will be released from prison in the South Island this month with conditions such as participating in treatment programs. Tūhapu are considering a revised Waitara lands bill that aims to bring an end to one of New Zealand's longest-running land disputes. If adopted, the bill will enable 770 leaseholders to buy properties illegally confiscated from Taranaki Maori in the 1860s. The bill now contains funds to restore the Waitara River and to enable Ōtaroa and Manukorahi Hapu to acquire more land at Waitara. Manukorahi chairwoman Patsy Bodger says the Hapu will consult over the weekend.
It's definitely better than what we first had, but we're still working on some tweaking or some, sort of rewording, not fundamental changes.
Patsy Bodger says ultimately Hapu members will decide whether to endorse the bill or not. The New Plymouth Mayor, Neil Holdham, acknowledges the land was confiscated. He says although it's not perfect, the bill presents the best way forward. A significant announcement promised by the Tourism Minister is a brochure and video encouraging visitors to protect New Zealand. Kelvin Davis announced the initiative in Wellington this afternoon, backed by several organisations. Tiaki, Care for New Zealand, encourages New Zealanders and visitors to experience the country in a way that keeps everyone safe, protects the environment and respects culture. In the brochure and short video, visitors are asked to promise to do so. Tiaki promise materials will be given to tourism organisations for free. More projects, including a driver safety campaign, are expected to be rolled out under the Tiaki brand later this year. The bacteria that causes Legionnaire's disease has been detected in a public spa pool in Auckland. The spa at the Auckland Council-owned Lagoon Pool and Leisure Centre in Panmure has been closed until further notice following the detection of the Legionella bacteria on Friday. It followed inquiries by the Auckland Regional Public Health Service into the activities of a person who tested positive. The council's head of active recreation, Rob McGee, says the strain of Legionella found in the pool was different to that detected in the person. Mr McGee says there's very minimal risk to other people who have used the spa pool. Legionnaire's disease is a form of pneumonia and is generally spread through contaminated water and air conditioners. Countdown has withdrawn a baking premix product from 3 of its stores after staff had allergic reactions. They reported nausea, headaches and rashes after handling the premix product made by Champion Flour Milling. A spokesperson for the supermarket chain says it's conducting an investigation. But Champion's chief executive, Bruce Peden, says there's no food safety or allergen risk associated with its product. It's not supplied to any other supermarkets or businesses. It's 5:05. Sport, 8 new players, several fringe starters and a dash of experience make up the All Blacks team named today to play Japan this weekend. New Zealand coach Steve Hansen says his new look team is brimming with enthusiasm for Saturday's Test match in Tokyo. Clay Wilson reports.
Just 2 of the 8 uncapped players, loose forward Dalton Papali'i and midfielder Matt Proctor, are set to start the game. Former New Zealand secondary schools captain and under-20 World Cup champion Papali'i has been impressive for the Blues and provincial champions Auckland this year. 26-year-old Proctor, meanwhile, has been a standout for Wellington and the Hurricanes for several years. The newcomers on the bench are Tyrell Lomax, Dylan Hunt, Gareth Evans, Mitchell Drummond, Brett Cameron and George Bridge, while 54 Test hooker Dane Coles, playing his first Test in more than a year, is easily the most experienced squad member. The venue for the Test, Ajinomoto Stadium, will host an All Blacks pool game against Namibia at next year's World Cup. This is Clay Wilson.
The Black Caps bowling coach Shane Jurgensen says better execution will be their focus for the second T20 against Pakistan on Saturday. The New Zealand cricketers lost this morning's opening game in Abu Dhabi by 2 runs, with Pakistan defending a modest total of 148. The Black Caps started their chase well, with opener Colin Munro scoring a half-century, but could not quite manage the 17 runs they needed to win from the final over. And the experienced defender Blair Tarrant has returned from injury to be named the Black Sticks men's captain for the Hockey World Cup, starting in India later this month. That's the news.
Buried but alive.
Avalanche, avalanche, avalanche. That's the first time I've ever experienced that.
Does it check out?
This gets us nowhere. It wasn't before a national minister, it was before Enlise Galloway, and he made the wrong decision.
And an effervescent All Black coach.
I don't think he needs any fizzing up. He's pretty fizzed up. I don't think any more fizzing and he'll bubble.
Sparkling Radio. Morning Report with Guy Espiner and Susie Ferguson, weekdays from 6.
Then on 9 to noon, celebrating the 150th anniversary of New Zealand Standard Time, the first implementation in the world. And after 10, an award-winning voice in Pacific literature, Lani Went Young, on self-publishing and weathering the trolls. Join me, Lynn Freeman, and for Catherine Ryan on 9 to noon after Morning Report on RNZ National.
Met service weather through to midnight tomorrow for all of the North Island. Showers and strong southerlies today. Some of the showers heavy with hail and thunderstorms possible. Showers becoming isolated this evening and retreating to the east coast. Mainly fine tomorrow. A few morning showers about the east coast and isolated afternoon showers in Taranaki and Taumaranui. Marlborough and Nelson, a few showers clearing this evening and becoming mainly fine. Bulla, Westland and Fiordland, mainly fine today. Isolated showers in Fiordland. Showers spreading northwards tomorrow morning, then turning to rain in Fiordland in the afternoon and Westland in the evening. Canterbury, Otago and Southland, fine spells. However, scattered showers in Southland spreading elsewhere this afternoon. Some heavy with thunderstorms possible in North Otago. Becoming fine tonight, but high cloud increasing tomorrow, bringing scattered rain from evening. And the Chatham Islands, cloudy periods with showers tomorrow. It's almost 9 minutes past 5 and you're listening to Checkpoint.
Thanks, Katrina. Coming up, the newly launched Tiaki promise, but first, the controversy over the convicted Czech drug dealer allowed to stay in New Zealand continues to escalate, with the Immigration Minister now ordering a full-scale investigation. Ian Lees-Galloway says new information has come to light, contradictory to what he had when he made his decision. RNZ has revealed a 2009 court judgment confirming Karel Schrubeck was given permission to travel to the Czech Republic that year and that he'd already been back to Europe. He had operated for a number of years under the false name of Jan Antalik, including when he came back before the courts. Now, Schrubeck was jailed in 2016 for more than 5 years for importing about 5 kilos of MDMA, or ecstasy as it's commonly known. The minister decided to confirm his residency in his real name, Schrubeck, which meant he could avoid deportation once released released from prison. Here's our political editor, Jane Patterson.
It's widely believed Strobrek was granted a reprieve by the minister because he feared for his safety if he returned home to the Czech Republic. But in 2009 he applied under the false name of Unterlich to go to the Czech Republic for business ahead of a pending court case. The High Court in Auckland granted him a 20-day window to go back. It also noted he had made a similar application earlier in the year and had gone back to Europe as a result. The Immigration Minister Ian Galloway told reporters the whole case is now under investigation.
I have become aware of allegations that call into question the veracity of the information that I relied upon when making a decision about Karol Strobrek. Of course, as a decision maker, I cannot rely on innuendo or hearsay or speculation, but these allegations certainly are concerning to me.
Mr Lees Galloway says he's asked immigration officials to investigate the veracity of the information and whether that contradicts what he based his original decision on. But the existence of the 2009 judgment was news to the minister.
I have not seen the detail of that judgment, so I would need to read that properly before I could determine whether it contradicts the information that I had.
National's immigration spokesperson Michael Woodhouse says the 2009 judgment makes a mockery of the minister's decision.
The minister didn't do his homework. It was very clear on the public record what had been speculated on, and that is despite the claims of fear of being sent back to the Czech Republic, he was voluntarily going back there and living in plain sight. I think it just speaks to the really shabby way in which this decision has been made.
In Parliament, Mr Woodhouse asked the minister why he allowed Strobrek to stay in New Zealand.
Did Mr Strobrek or his lawyer assert that he was in danger if he was returned to the Czech Republic?
Mr Speaker, given that I have just called for an investigation into... Mr Speaker, given that I have just called for an investigation into the information that I had available and some additional information that is allegedly available, I am not making any further comment on what information I used to make that decision.
Mr Woodhouse then asked the minister about the 2009 court judgment.
Was he aware Mr Strobrek twice returned to the Czech Republic while awaiting trial on kidnapping and aggravated robbery charges?
Mr Speaker, it is not in the public interest for me to divulge what information Mr Speaker, it is not in the public interest for me to divulge what information I did and did not have.
Strobrek also came up before the Parole Board last year, and in its decision it notes his association with the Hells Angels gang. It also says, apart from the drug importing, he only has a history of 2 driving matters in New Zealand, but concludes that does not fully represent his engagements with law enforcement authorities both here and in the Czech Republic. The decision also refers to a current application for Strobrek to be extradited to the Czech Republic. However, the Justice Minister Andrew Little told Parliament there is no extradition request, but he's not ruling out one being lodged in the future. From Parliament for Checkpoint, Jane Patterson.
Visitors local and overseas are being asked to take the Tiaki promise. Not heard of it yet? Well, it has only just launched this afternoon. It was launched by Tourism Minister Kelvin Davis alongside tourism and conservation related organisations. Taxpayer money has gone into the campaign. Here's a bit of a taste.
The Tiaki promise is a commitment to care for New Zealand, for now and for future generations.
To care for land, sea and nature, treading lightly and leaving no trace.
To travel safely, showing care and consideration for all.
To respect culture, travelling with an open heart and mind.
There's no actual physical pledge, it's a commitment, an attitude, and the organisations plan to spread the word mainly via the web, a social media hashtag and an in-flight video on Air New Zealand. The campaign comes hot on the heels of debate over freedom campers, tourist drivers and a burgeoning number of visitors and a straining infrastructure. I asked Tourism Minister Kelvin Davis to explain to me what the Tiaki promise is.
You could say it's a movement. It's just a positive encouragement for people to look after New Zealand, look after each other, to have respect for our culture, our country, and to make sure, like I say, that when they leave New Zealand or they finish their trip around New Zealand, that the country isn't in a worse state than when they arrived here.
Was it your idea?
No, this is a collaboration of 7 organisations that have involved in the tourism sector. It's collaboration at its best. It's about the tourism sector acting as and working as a team to get great outcomes for New Zealand through tourism.
So how will you measure those outcomes? How will you know if it's worked? If it is a feeling and it's a hashtag and a movement, how do you know that it's worked? How will you measure that?
Well, one of the, we've had issues around responsible camping. We'd like to think that those issues are resolved. We'd like to think that the feedback that we receive from people, the mood of the nation when we do those sorts of surveys, that we have positive results from all those different indicators that the tourism sector use to measure its performance.
But those aren't actual tangible measures you've just listed there. You've just talked about your hope, and you hope that you have positive feelings back about it. But actual tangible measures, how will you measure that this message has got through and people are doing what you want?
I think those are. Well, look, I disagree. I think that there's ways that the tourism sector measures how well this will be, how effective this will be. So, no, I disagree with you.
So, what evidence have you got that these kinds of campaigns are effective, that they work? Did you do focus groups, or did you do some kind of market testing?
Well, just bear in mind, Lisa, that this wasn't a government-driven thing. This is the tourism sector coming together, 7 organisations that have seen something similar. I believe Palau, I believe Iceland, I believe Hawaii do something similar. And so this is the tourism sector actually working together to try and get these great outcomes and to educate our visitors on how to behave while they're in New Zealand.
But there's public money that's gone into the pot, isn't there?
Well, Tourism New Zealand has put $130,000 towards it, but there's 6 other organisations that have also contributed to this. And like I say, this is collaboration from the tourism sector at its best. It's a positive thing. It's encouraging our visitors to care for New Zealand when they get here, and to sort of state these are our values. We look after the land, the sea. We look after each other as we drive. We care for the culture. We appreciate people.
Why do you reckon it's going to work? What makes you think it'll work?
Oh, look, there's a whole heap of expertise in the tourism sector that have come together to do, to develop this concept. And, I've got great faith in the people who have done this work. I think, it's taken some time to pull together. There have been highly successful organisations in the field of tourism, so I've got a lot of faith in the work that they've done and this, the Tiaki promise, this whole concept that they've brought together. This is a great day for tourism.
So you like the campaign? You like it?
Yeah, absolutely. I support it 100%. This is going to be good for New Zealand. This is educating people to respect our communities, to respect our culture, to respect our people, to respect our our environment. This is good for New Zealand.
But those are messages that we're constantly putting out. So do you think maybe, or would it have been better just to have some clear road signs, some extra toilets, some practical things instead?
I think you've just been too simplistic, Lisa. I think that you need to see the positives in this whole concept, and it's pretty disappointing that you're talking it down the way you are.
No, I'm just curious as to what you think the positives are and how you're going to measure them in a tangible way.
Well, like I say, the tourism sector, this is the concept that they've come up, they've collaborated on. They'll be working together on the ways to measure it as well. And I, as the Minister of Tourism, totally endorse it and support it. I think this is fantastic.
And that is the Tourism Minister, Calvin Davis there. So what do tourists think of the Tiaki promise? We sent Alex Perrottet out to find out.
Kia ora, Lisa. What better place to be after today's announcement than Auckland International Airport at the Arrivals Lounge? Now, I'll have you know, I've already taken the Tiaki promise and I will be putting it to some of the visitors who are coming in today. We'll bring you all their reactions straight after the news at 6.
Meanwhile, a person has died after a tourist bus and rental car collided on a popular South Island tourist route this morning. State Highway 6 near Kingston was closed until mid-morning when one lane was reopened as emergency services worked to clear the road and inspect the scene. 10 people had been taken to hospital. One was in a critical condition. Our Otago Southland reporter Tess Brunton filed this report.
It was a clear day, straight stretch of road and good conditions. So what caused the crash which claimed a life and injured 10 other people? Otago Lake Central Area Commander Inspector Olaf Jensen says it could be days before that's known.
Straight stretch of road, the bus coming up a hill out of a small gully and the car coming over the brow of the hill and have collided. It should be a safe piece of road, but a collision's occurred there. So we're going to work through to determine the why behind it.
Both vehicles, which he says were extensively damaged in the crash, were removed this afternoon. The road is the main tourist route used by people travelling between Queenstown and Milford Sound. It's been reopened and most of the people on the small tourist bus have been released from hospital. Mr Jensen said they're on a tour that operates out of Christchurch. He wouldn't confirm who died in the crash or the condition of the other people involved, including one who was airlifted to Dunedin Hospital in a critical condition. Police victim support workers are helping those involved in the crash.
Various set of tragic circumstances. You don't start your day off in New Zealand expecting for this to happen to you. So we're working through with them to support them, and also their tour company are also supporting them.
Mr Jensen says anyone travelling on New Zealand's roads need to take care and not rush. He says it's all about getting to their destination safely. The Serious Crash Unit is investigating the scene, and police encourage anyone who witnessed the crash to contact them. For Checkpoint, Tess Brunton tēnei.
The country's largest fuel company, Z Energy, has opened its books to reveal a disappointing half-year result. This comes at a time when petrol prices have hit all-time highs and motorists and politicians are scrutinising the industry. Madison Reedy has more.
Pain not just at the pump, but in fuel companies' finances too. The country's largest fuel retailer, Z Energy, has had its underlying profit slashed by almost a third in the past 6 months. Its half-year operating earnings were down by annual comparisons too, by 21% to $175 million. Rising petrol prices have been a hot topic of late, and since the Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern said this,
New Zealand consumers, in my book, are being fleeced.
Z's share price has slid from above $7 to below $6, on par with where it was in early 2016. Z's long-standing chief executive, Mike Bennett, says the past 6 months have been awful and he's sorry to shareholders, but he didn't say the same to consumers who are buying less.
There are people who invest in our company on the expectation we'll do what we said we would, and we didn't. What really affected the result, it comes down to 3 things. One is record high prices meant that demand was impacted. No doubt that this affects household budgets and businesses, so people bought less. We had a significant supply disruption during the period. Refining New Zealand had a shutdown and that went on for way longer than they anticipated. That meant we lost a margin there in terms of the refinery margin, and it cost us money to make up for the product shortfall that we had. And then our retail margins and our retail volumes were affected by more than what happened to the industry. So we didn't sell as much as the industry did, and our unit margins were compressed mostly as a result of prices rising rapidly and to record highs.
Z's chief executive Mike Bennett says petrol prices are at the mercy of international oil prices, which can be shaken around by geopolitical dilemmas. Mark Stockdale from the Automobile Association agrees motorists shouldn't shoot the messenger when it comes to pricing.
Some motorists will think that fuel companies are ripping us off, as the government has suggested they are, and they'll think it's just fuel companies upping their margins because they can. But if you look at the movements in the commodity price, the changes at the pump that we have seen mirror those changes in global commodity prices, allowing also for a fall in the New Zealand exchange rate. So that hasn't helped either.
Mark Stockdale says the only way motorists could be jibbed is in the make-up of margins. That's what fuel companies take from your fuel bill to pay for overheads like importing fuel, maintaining stations and paying staff wages. He says there's no way to size up just how fat fuel companies' margins are per litre of fuel, hence the need for a regulatory once-over, which Parliament is working through at the moment. For Checkpoint, Madison Reedy.
Down at the hill suburbs of eastern Porirua are set to get a $1.5 billion facelift from the government with the region's first Kiwi-build project and the revamp of thousands of state houses. A partnership with local iwi Ngāti Toa, it involves refurbishment of nearly 3,000 state houses and construction of 2,000 affordable and market-priced homes. Ruth Hill was at today's announcement at Russell School in Cannons Creek.
These Russell School children, singing as the dignitaries signed the deeds for the deal, will be well grown up by the time the project is finally completed in 25 years' time. Speaking to about 200 people squashed into a marquee with a gale threatening to rip it into the sky, Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern said she hopes one day she'll be able to drive her grandchildren around the streets and claim it as being one of her government's biggest achievements.
Every child deserves to grow up in a warm, dry home, to have a bit of security around the home that they live in as well, in terms of being able to stay and keep their connections to the local community. We know that we need to do a refresh of housing here. This will give people housing they deserve.
The plans include 2,900 revamped and new state houses, with a net increase of 150. Of those, 900 in the western suburbs of Titahi Bay, Mana, Takupūwhaia, Elsdon and Tawa will be managed by Ngāti Toa, which is also upgrading public housing in those areas. Executive Director of Ngāti Toa Rangatira, Sumetu Tere, says a lot of the details have yet to be worked out, but he's confident that iwi isn't taking on a big liability.
It's only 900 houses. It's not 900 people. People are more complex than houses.
Existing tenants will still be eligible for income-related rents. While their houses are being done up, they will be rehoused by Housing New Zealand as close to home as possible and can choose to return once refurbishment is complete. Porirua Mayor Mike Tana says he had made successive appeals to central government over the years to improve the public housing stock in the city.
For 9 years, nothing happened, not a single house. As a matter of fact, I think the last government was trying to sell them off. So to have an agreement and the money put aside already for this to happen is just phenomenal. We'll take the time, but we'll make sure that as a partner, that those people who most need those homes will get them.
It is a lot of money, $1.5 billion, but walking around the streets of the creek, you can see just how far it has to go. Old, cold and run down for the most part is the verdict from most Housing New Zealand tenants on their homes.
You know, the house that we live now, that's no good for us. It's too cold for me and our kids.
Not woman, they're too cool every day.
People get pushed out of the communities. The richer people come through and take over and change the place. And that's, as long as that doesn't happen.
The Prime Minister insists that boosting the supply of housing is going to help affordability across the board.
Wellington region has experienced high housing prices, as has other parts of New Zealand where there's been pressure on the housing market. So that extra supply will certainly make a difference, and we want Porirua locals to have first dibs.
Physical works start next year, and the first Kiwi-build homes will be ready in 2020. For Checkpoint, Ruth Hill.
Thousands of people have taken to streets across Pakistan to protest against a Supreme Court ruling which freed a Christian woman who'd been sentenced to death. Asia Bibi was jailed in 2010 after being accused of insulting the Prophet Muhammad in a row with her neighbours. Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan condemned hardliners who'd called for people to come out in support of strong blasphemy laws. The BBC's Sekunda Kamani reports from Islamabad.
Thousands of angry protesters have been gathering in cities across Pakistan. They're furious that Asia Bibi is being set free instead of executed. She was accused of blasphemy following an argument with a group of Muslim women in their village to the west of Lahore. Her lawyer, Saif al-Muluk, welcomed the verdict but said he was worried for her safety.
No, she is free. She can do whatever she feels like. She can enjoy her life as a free woman.
Can she stay in Pakistan? Will she stay in Pakistan?
I don't think so, that anybody once alleged for the blasphemy can live in this country.
Asia Bibi's case became even more prominent following the murder of a senior politician who had spoken in support of her and had called for the country's blasphemy laws to be reformed. The killer subsequently became a cult hero for thousands of Pakistanis, with a shrine dedicated to him on the outskirts of Islamabad. Asia Bibi is likely to be released from prison in the coming days, and many expect the unrest to continue. The Prime Minister Imran Khan condemned those taking to the streets, saying they were doing a disservice to Islam.
Seconda Kamani in Islamabad reporting there. Coming up, a Cromwell GP fears lives could be put in danger when the only after-hours urgent medical care service in central Otago shuts up shop for the last time tonight. Women across the country say they're using rags, socks and toilet paper or skipping school because they can't afford sanitary products. The real cost of the Royal Tour, and Alex asks tourists at Auckland Airport to take the Tiaki challenge. We would love your feedback, so don't forget to text us on 2101. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, Facebook us, Checkpoint, or email checkpoint@radionz.co.nz. But first, here's Katrina with the headlines.
The opposition says the immigration minister is throwing his officials under the bus rather than taking responsibility for a terrible decision. Ian Lees-Galloway has been under pressure for granting residency to a convicted Czech drug smuggler, Karol Srubeck. The Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern says Porirua residents will go to the top of the ballot for the city's new Kiwi Build programme. The $1.5 billion plan includes 2,900 refurbished and new state houses and at least 2,000 affordable Kiwi Build and market-priced homes. Ms Ardern says boosting the supply of housing will make home ownership possible for many more people. Indonesian divers have retrieved a black box from a Lion Air passenger jet that crashed into the sea this week with 189 people on board. The flight data recorder is reportedly intact. The country's biggest fuel retailer expects petrol prices to stay steady or even fall as world prices ease. Z Energy's chief executive, Mike Bennett, has rejected claims fuel companies are making excessive profits or fleecing customers. He says Z is happy to go under the microscope of a Commerce Commission price inquiry. Letting fees will now become a thing of the past, with Parliament passing legislation doing away with them today. The change will take effect from December the 12th. The Housing Minister, Phil Twyford, says the new law could put up to $47 million back into the pockets of Kiwi families each year. A new study has warned that the world's oceans have been absorbing far more heat than previously thought, undermining efforts to limit global warming. International researchers say the seas have soaked up 60% more heat over the past 25 years than scientists earlier believed. Power company crews in Auckland are on standby as strong gales are forecast for the region tonight. Vector says it's preparing to respond as quickly as possible if there are any power cuts. Those are the headlines. I'm back at 6.
Thanks, Katrina. Time now for business news. Madison Reddy's in the studio. You covered off Z Energy's half-year results earlier in the program, but another bank today opened their books. Which one is it and how are they doing?
This was BNZ, which is still one of the big four, not quite as big as ANZ, which we mentioned yesterday is the biggest, but they certainly still had a big net profit. So their profit was over $1 billion. We mentioned yesterday that that's not unprecedented, particularly when it comes to banks. So this is the second time that BNZ's profit has tipped over the $1 billion mark. It didn't last year or the year before, but in 2015 it did. So in the past year, they've seen a 10% increase. Last year, they reported a net profit of about $937 million, nearing that $1 billion mark. But this year, they actually did it and tipped over. Now, that was due to growth pretty much across the board. There were almost no negatives in the breakdown of their figures. So when it comes to borrowing and lending, so lending for home loans, that increased the most. That was up 7%. So they gave out home loans in the year to 14,000 New Zealanders, which is a lot, especially when you kind of see house prices at the moment and a lot of people complaining that first home buyers can't afford to even
Someone's getting into the market.
Yeah, exactly, to even get that mortgage. So that is still on the rise, and they do expect that to continue. year. They expect to hold on to that gain this year as well. Business lending, which is particularly important for BNZ. So being the Bank of New Zealand, they particularly market to businesses and smaller businesses as well. They think that's where they have a competitive edge. If you've ever heard a BNZ ad, it's typically to do with businesses. So lending there was up, not as much, but still up by 3%, so still a couple of billion there. Customer deposits were up too. So that's the amount of money that a customer of BNZ actually puts into their bank account. Now that went up too, which could suggest that people are earning more people are being employed, something like that. They also expect that to increase with some kind of economic results out at the moment. Their net interest margins were up too. I mean, everything across the board was up. So
there was nothing for them to complain about.
No, absolutely not. And particularly when we talk about fatter margins, to break that down, that's the amount that they take from interest payments from the likes of loans. So more loans, you would also expect interest margins to go up.
What about the markets?
The markets, we were up again today, so we rose 1%, so that's up nearly 92 points. You remember last night we were up over 100 points as well. We're doing pretty well this week to close at 8,844 points. The New Zealand dollar rose to 65.8 cents. New Zealand dollar, oh yes, it did rise. Sorry, I'm reading this a little bit wrong. We're buying it at 65.8 US cents, 92.2 to the Australian and 51.2 British pence. Z Energy's share price there as well slid again today, 9% in the day, so they're down 57 cents.
Poor results. Right. All right, thanks Madison, appreciate you coming in. Let's head south now. A Cromwell GP fears lives could be in danger when the only after-hours urgent medical care service in central Otago shuts its doors from 10 p.m. starting tonight. The clinic is based at Dunstan Hospital, and for the last 3 years it's been open between 6 p.m. and 8 a.m. for patients from around the district like Cromwell, Clyde and Alexandra, to name a few. But concerns over shift length and safety means there's not enough doctors willing to staff it. It will now only be open from 6 p.m. until 10 p.m. Dr. Greg White is breaking ranks, he says, out of a sense of moral obligation. He'll be on call to his patients from 10 tonight, just in case. But others will likely have to rely on limited ambulance services and hospitals more than an hour away in Dunedin or Queenstown. I asked him why his colleagues decided to close the service.
I guess they've drawn a line in the sand as a group and said we can't do a 14-hour night shift and then work and see our patients as well the next day. There's been some staff turnover, I think, and it's just not sustainable. There's gaps in the roster, and they just couldn't provide the service anymore. So, which is a shame. It has worked pretty well for the last couple of years, but So there just hasn't been a solution found, despite lots of meetings with the District Health Board, the local hospital, St John's, the mayor, you name it. Everyone's had. They just haven't come up with a workable alternative. But it's the reality of rural medicine, really, both general practice and the local hospital. Our main issue is we don't have an emergency department in our region. Our nearest one is probably Queenstown or Dunedin.
So what's your worst fear with this situation that you're now facing? What's the worst that could happen in your view?
I don't need to imagine, because I've had all the worst case scenarios happen over the last 20 odd years. So with calls being missed, no ambulance being available, people being called away to other things, and it only takes one ambulance. Once an ambulance is called out, then there's no other ambulance available. So
has anyone ever died to your knowledge as a result of that?
It's hard to label blame ever, but there has been unfortunate breakdown in communications rather than lack of availability. But at that time there was people, and that's with the entire system up and running, things can still go wrong. We're a long way from help. The helicopter takes an hour just to get here alone. So you're having no one no medical practitioner available in the community for around 15,000 people is, I can foresee a bit of a recipe for disaster.
So do you fear someone will die as a consequence of this new arrangement?
I guess that's the worst case scenario. Yes, I'd say yes is the short answer to that.
So how would you describe the situation then? If you wake up in the night and what, you've got chest pain or something, and there's no doctor at the after hours, you have to rely on ringing 111, hope that an ambulance is available or that you can be chopped out if it's dire. So how would you describe that situation?
Yeah, inadequate. In one word, it's inadequate for towns the size of ours now. You've got to add in the fact we get a lot of holiday makers over summer. There's going to be you can probably double that population, and there's going to be a hell of a lot of ambulance call-outs over the Christmas period, and nowhere for them to take patients. So,
in a nutshell, what needs to happen?
I think everyone is talking. We need to keep talking and so on. There needs to be some cleverer thinking about funding, because it always comes down to money. Yeah, both for us and for the local hospital, because the main problem we have is they're only a small hospital and can't.
You need more money. That's it. Bottom line, you need more money.
Bottom line is more money. Not a huge amount. I mean, we're not talking millions of dollars.
Could you put a figure on it before we go, Greg? Could you put a figure on that?
Possibly 6 figures. We're probably looking at 6 figures.
For 6 figures, you could save lives.
I think, yes, you could put it that way, yep.
Dr Greg White there. Dunstan Hospital's Acting General Manager Debbie Laurie says the service's reduced hours will be a challenge for the hospital because it doesn't have an emergency department, nor is it funded to have a doctor on a night shift. She says the hospital will always put patients' care first and liaise with ambulance staff as to whether patients with urgent needs can be seen at the hospital, but it is still trying to figure out what to do if patients turn up on their doorstep unannounced. Women across the country are using rags, socks and toilet paper or skipping school and work when they have their period as they can't afford sanitary products. More than 5,000 women were surveyed by Kids Can in a push to understand the extent of period poverty in New Zealand. The findings reveal nearly a third of respondents skip school or work when they have their period as they can't afford sanitary products. Katie Scotcher reports.
Megan Chasland is a mother of 3. She's studying full-time to become a teacher, so her family relies solely on her husband's income. Every month she purchases sanitary items for her teenage daughter, but she says she cannot afford them for herself. Instead, Megan uses a set of rags, which she washes so they can be reused.
It's awful. It's awful having to wear a piece of old sheet in between your legs. And you can't really do anything, like you think, can't go and sit round and go for a walk in the park or anything, because, if you're wearing a rag.
Megan says being able to afford sanitary products is a luxury many people take for granted.
I seriously have to think about that and what we have to sacrifice to buy those items, and that will be meat or butter or a litre of milk over 2 litres of milk.
Mother of 2, Melanie Gilligan, has a similar story.
I've just used rag, like one of those old cloth nappies and sort of folded it up and at home.
She often stays home from work when she has her period, as she doesn't have the money to purchase pads and tampons. Melanie says when she can afford sanitary products, she gives them to her daughter.
I've given her all the pads. I'll stay at home because I don't want her to be ashamed of her body and all that. And I feel she should be going to school and not staying home just because it's that time of the month.
The survey is thought to be the first of its kind. The findings show more than half of respondents find it difficult to access sanitary items due to their cost. And 1 in 3 respondents have to prioritise buying other items such as food over pads and tampons. Kids Can founder Julie Chapman says women shouldn't be forced to choose between the two.
This is poverty across the board. It's material hardship. It's families and girls and women struggling to pay for the basics.
Over the last 2 years, the government-funded drug buying agency Pharmac has received 2 applications for sanitary products, but both applications were rejected as they were considered out of scope of the agency's work. In a statement, Director of Operations Lisa Williams said they haven't received any further applications. She said they are open-minded to considering future applications that show a health need and a therapeutic benefit with supporting evidence. Mō te hōtaka o te ahiahi nei, ko Katie Scotcher-Aho.
As expected, the All Blacks team named today to face Japan in Tokyo on Saturday is one of the most inexperienced New Zealand teams in recent memory, with 22 of the 23 players who featured in last weekend's win over Australia already departed to the UK for the team's 3 upcoming games there. The New Zealand squad to face Japan includes 8 uncapped players. It also includes 10 players with less than 10 caps, while 54 Test hooker Dane Coles, playing his first Test in more than a year, is one of just a handful of players who could be considered familiar faces. Sports reporter Clay Wilson joins me in the studio now. This team, pretty green looking. Is it what you expected though?
Oh, it is what we expected, because this test was put on the calendar really as a promotional tool for next year's World Cup, which of course is in Japan. So of the 51 players named, there was always going to be a lot of them going to head early to the UK. So we're always going to see a pretty green team for this. So we've got 8 debutants and 2 of those are starting now. They're really notable because you look at the likes of Dalton Papali'i, flanker. He's still only 21 years old, so he's been a real standout for Auckland and the Blues, and Auckland of course won this year's NPC competition. The other is Matt Proctor. He's a midfielder from Wellington. He's a bit older. He's 26, which you could probably consider as quite old to make your debut for the All Blacks nowadays. He's from, like I say, Wellington, the Hurricanes, a midfielder, but a player who's been really, really solid. So, then 6 other players on the bench who are set to make their debuts. 3 players from the Canterbury team who lost to Auckland in the final. But some players who have done some pretty good things this year and got noticed by the selectors.
So with all the freshies then, who are the familiar players who will be relied on to lead the way?
Yeah, well, Luke Whitelock is going to captain the team from number 8, but really Dane Coles, as you mentioned in your intro there, he's easily the most experienced player with 54 Test caps. There's only 4 others with more than 10 caps. You have your 2 wingers in Nehemil Niskata and Waisaki Naholo, and then 2 players in the forwards, Ofa Tuangafasi and Patrick Tuipulotu. There's also a few players who have been around the environment for a while, the likes of Geordie Barrett, Nat Laumapi, as I mentioned, Richie Moanga, and a couple of front rowers, Tim Perry and Liam Coltman. So there is some experience there, but on the whole, a pretty inexperienced side. Yeah,
so given that on the whole it is an inexperienced side, can any of these players push a case for being in starting line-up against England next weekend?
Well, Coles is the one that really stands out here. I mean, he has been out for more than a year, but before he left, he really was one of the best players in the world in any position. He was just doing really good things, and All Blacks fans will well remember what he was capable of. Cody Taylor, though, who's taken that number 2 jersey, has really made that jersey his own. He's really grown as a player. So perhaps it would be a push for Coles to take that number 2 spot for the England game. But a really good game might get Steve Hansen and co thinking. The others are the outside backs, Naholo, Geordie Barrett and Milner Scudder. They're players who are probably only 1 spot outside of being in that starting 23. So likewise with Dane Coles, a great performance that might get the selectors thinking a little bit.
Let's switch codes. White Ferns cricketers departing tonight for Women's World T20 in the West Indies. You were at the event for them leaving. How are they feeling?
Yeah, I guess as you expect before a tournament like this, very positive, very excited. It's a team with a point to prove, so you can tell they're eager to get on the road and get going. They've got a couple of warm-up games early next week, and then they start against India, so one of the other title contenders at this tournament. That's next Saturday morning, New Zealand time.
So are they capable of winning the tournament?
Well, the short answer is yes. They are coming off a 3-0 series loss to Australia just recently, but I guess that's been motivating for them. They're also adapting to a bit of a change in leadership. The captaincy has changed with Susie Bates stepping down, long-time captain, and Amy Satterthwaite coming in and taking that role. So there is some adaptation going on, but it's a team with world-class players, the likes of Bates, Satterthwaite, Sophie Devine, and then young Amelia Kerr, who a lot of cricket fans will know, 18 years old, and just probably one of the best young women's cricketers in the world at the moment. So, I think motivation motivation obviously won't also be a factor, given the series lost to Australia and the last couple of world tournaments, World T20 2016 and last year's One Day World Cup. The White Ferns went away with a lot of expectation and didn't necessarily reach that. So the couple of players I spoke to today definitely said that was a motivating factor. They wanted to prove that they were capable of winning on the biggest stage.
So they'll be putting pressure on themselves. Thanks, Clay. Appreciate it. And the Duke and Duchess of Sussex have left Auckland and are winging their way back to the UK after their hectic 16-day South Pacific tour. The couple's 4-day visit to New Zealand attracted big crowds and plenty of media coverage, but it comes with a price tag for the taxpayer. Previous royal tours have cost about $1 million. So what do we get out of it, and is it really worth it? Sarah Robson has been weighing up some of the benefits.
Prince Harry and Meghan walking hand in hand in the rain along a beach in Abel Tasman National Park. Prince Harry and Meghan cloaked in korowai, receiving a powerful porphyry in Rotorua. Prince Harry and Meghan shaking hands with crowds of people wherever they go. These are the pictures that have hit newspapers, TV screens and websites around the world over the last few days, as the royal couple spent 4 days in New Zealand as part of their first official overseas tour together. And all that media attention is thanks to the 80-strong press pack that's been travelling with them. ITV's royal editor Chris Shipp says alongside the usual British correspondents, 3 American media outlets made the 16-day trip down under as well.
Having that number of press, I think, in New Zealand must have been quite a coup for the country.
Why such a coup? Chris Shipp says the tour has been big news back in the UK.
It's getting onto the news bulletins every night. We have 3 news bulletins a day. It's easily made 2 of the 3 bulletins every single day since the tour started.
Chris Shipp says he's been busy working on a programme that will screen during prime time on UK television screens next Monday.
On our documentary, we're focusing on taking as many landscapes and pictures that aren't of Harry and Meghan as we possibly can. And I think, all of that helps to build a fantastic picture of your country and to showcase the beauty of the landscape that I think most people in the UK know about in New Zealand, but it's given us an opportunity to remind them about quite how beautiful a place this is.
Chris Shipp and the other British journalists have been posting up a storm on social media. It's the sort of coverage that Tourism New Zealand is banking on to promote the country as a holiday destination. While the figures for this tour aren't in yet, Lauren Vosper says when Prince William and his wife Kate visited back in 2014, the value of the media coverage that tour generated was put at $70 million. So how did they arrive at that figure? Ms Vosper says their offshore teams are monitoring all that media coverage.
We check for key messages to make sure that the stories are talking about the destination things that we want them to be covered. And then we attribute value based on what that coverage would have cost in pure advertising.
Economist Shamabeel Jacob says economic benefits from royal tours are difficult to measure.
Yeah, it's really hard to say that, I went to New Zealand because I saw the royals on tour in New Zealand. It's not just the one thing, right? We market ourselves through so many different things, formal ways, informal ways, in the Lord of the Rings. It's all of those things put together that sort of creates the New Zealand image.
As well as stunning natural scenery, fashion is always a major talking point of any royal tour. This morning, Vanity Fair posted an article detailing every single one of Meghan's looks from the 16-day trip. Amongst them all were 4 items by the well-known New Zealand designer Karen Walker.
Temptation stud earrings, Northern Lights sunglasses, Banks trench coat, Fathom jacket.
The Duchess stepped off the plane in Wellington and attended the official welcome ceremony at Government House wearing the new season Banks trench. Photos of her outfit were instantly beamed around the world, and the fashion Bible Vogue went on to label it one of the season's must-have coats.
Yeah, of course the coat sold out, but it's like we don't have thousands of them anyway. We're a boutique brand, so it's like selling out of a style is nothing unusual for us. That's perfectly normal, but yes, it sold out maybe a little quicker than it would have otherwise.
Karen Walker says they've also had a 75% increase in traffic to her label's website from the United States, and she reckons that can be attributed to the royal tour. While Ms Walker admits she's no stranger to having celebrities wear her garments, it is a bit different this time.
Yeah, it's always nice when it's in your own hometown, right? And I think that's where the emotional bit comes into it. We're used to having well-known people wearing our product. Every day there's something that comes across my in tray, like Jennifer Lopez wearing our glasses was a Mayan tray when I woke up this morning. And that's great, but when it's in your own hometown or your own home country and you're really your community, like the person I stand next to and I'm getting my coffee in the morning is talking to you about it, there's something quite different about that.
And these punters, who turned out in Auckland earlier this week to catch a glimpse of the Duke and Duchess, reckon the trip was worth it.
Well, it makes people smile, for one thing, and they come out in the pouring rain.
Because the relationship with New Zealand and the UK is massive, obviously part of the Commonwealth, and there might be the other ends of the world, but they're actually very close.
I think they've done a lot of good work with mental health issues, which is quite huge in New Zealand. The work that they're doing here and the places they're visiting are really well chosen.
Mō te hōtaka o te ahi, ko Sarah Robson, aho.
A Whangarei man is calling on people with Celtic background to ditch Halloween in October and celebrate spring as their ancestors did. Doug Chowns is an artist who is something of an expert in all things Gaelic, and he's been staging a one-man May Day fest today outside the City Library. Lois Williams paid a visit to see what he's on about.
Decked out with a flowery hat and a squeeze box, Doug Chowns is having himself a fine old Beltane, the old name for May Day. Well, he would be if the library goers would just dance a bit more, but he's giving it his best shot. Dougie, as he calls himself, is perched on a stool under one of the carved po outside the library. They represent all the cultures that settled in Whangarei, but this one's the Celtic po, and she has a name, the Young Tree of Life.
Crúv Beca Og, the Young Tree of Life. So you never pass her without acknowledging her or walking round her. If you feel rotten, walk round clockwise, sunwise, and you'll heal yourself. So it's very, very old tradition going back thousands and thousands of years.
Doug Chowns says that's the origin of the Maypole dance and the joyous anticipation of summer. But the po, carved under his supervision by children more than a decade ago, goes unadorned and uncelebrated. Children these days don't welcome spring with music and dance and flowers. They're out prowling the streets dressed as ghouls and zombies. Doug Chowns says ghouls and ghosties have their place, but they're not creatures of spring.
No, Halloween is good, but
we should have it when?
Well, we should have it on the 1st of May.
Oh, so we're all back to front.
We're back to front.
Doug says in Celtic cultures, the ceremonial fires of Beltane mark the end of winter and the return of the light and the coming of the growing season.
So they made 2 big fires and they drove all their cattle between the fires to cleanse them, and all the people passed between 2 fires.
And they also performed some interesting fertility rites, not that Mr Chowns is campaigning to revive those. But he'd love to see New Zealand children given a chance to celebrate spring as they do to this day in Cornwall.
On May Day, they go through all the houses, holding hands in a long line to that tune. Literally hundreds and hundreds of children who celebrate these things throughout Cornwall.
And do they demand sweets when they do that?
No, the sweets thing, the trick and treat, is American.
Onlooker Mike Cameron was one who gamely had a crack at the po dance today. He says he'd be happy to see a bit less American and a bit more Celtic culture in the town.
Yeah, why not? Bring it all back, more cultural things the better. It's a bit different, and there's, more Celts and Scots and people that are here, I suppose, and the Americanised thing, I don't know, I just never have celebrated Halloween or a chance for kids to get lollies, that's about it. Yeah.
And Wayne Lawrenson, another Dougie supporter, says floral dancing would be a lot more spring-like than tiny ghosts and vampires.
Would be much nicer, but I don't think the warehouse would like it very much because they would lose money out of it.
Sell fake flowers.
Well, you could make those bonnets like Dougie's wearing, and so people would walk around with hats with flowers and sort of almost hippie.
Dougie Chowns says he'd be happy just to see Whangarei's Celtic po touched, talked to, walked around clockwise and simply remembered, especially at Aotearoa's Beltane, the 1st of November. For Checkpoint, Lois Williams.
Time for some of your feedback now. We had a story earlier in the show about a survey done of 5,000 women. A third of the respondents said that they skip school or work when they have their period because they can't afford sanitary products. This from Richard. Haven't heard from the Minister for Women, he says. Perhaps the government could fund sanitary products. And from Sam, I'm in my 70s. I and my friends, and we're just ordinary people, Sam says, had towels that were used and washed for our period. We never felt disadvantaged. We all went to school and we did PE. Another person has got in contact to say a packet of 18 sanitary pads can be bought for $2 and Countdown at the moment. Another story that we brought to you earlier in the show, the Tiaki Challenge. So this is a pledge that overseas tourists and local travellers are being asked to take. It's supposed to lower the impact of travellers on the country. Someone is asking, are tourist operators making the pledge as well? And also we're reminded by another person who's got in contact of the Be a Tidy Kiwi campaign. That would have been hard to measure, they say, but it worked. One of the few public-type policy initiatives that did. This is a good initiative, they say, in respect of the Tiaki pledge, and it's a good start. It's imaginative and a good thing. Well, we have sent Alex Perrottet, and for those of you watching, to check at the airport if they're into this pledge.
RNZ News at 6. Ngā mihi nui, good evening. Ko Katrina Batanaho. The Immigration Minister remains under intense pressure over the convicted Czech drug smuggler allowed to stay in New Zealand with a full investigation underway. That includes whether a 2009 court judgment he had not previously seen, as revealed by RNZ Today, contradicts the original information on which Ian Lees-Galloway based his decision. Here's our political editor, Jane Patterson.
Carol Strobrick was granted residency under his real name by the minister, avoiding deportation once he's finished his 5-year jail sentence. It's widely believed he had argued he feared for his safety if sent back to the Czech Republic. However, the 2009 judgment shows he was given permission by the courts twice in that year to return, and it notes he did go back to Europe. The investigation ordered by Mr Lees-Galloway this afternoon will gauge the veracity of the new information and whether it would have had any bearing on his decision. National says the minister failed to do due diligence and should take full responsibility. From Parliament, Jane Patterson.
The Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern says Porirua residents will go to the top of the ballot for the city's new Kiwi Build programme, the first in the region. The $1.5 billion plan, a partnership with local iwi Ngāti Toa, includes 2,900 refurbished and new state houses and at least 2,000 affordable Kiwi Build and market-priced homes. Ms Ardern says boosting the supply of housing will make home ownership possible for many more people.
The Wellington region has experienced high housing prices, as has other parts of New Zealand where there's been pressure on the housing market. So that extra supply will certainly make a difference, and we want Porirua locals to have first dibs.
Jacinda Ardern says existing Housing New Zealand tenants won't see their tenancy conditions or rent change. The Indonesian National Search and Rescue Agency says it has retrieved one of the black boxes from the Lion Air flight that crashed into the Java Sea on Monday with 189 people aboard. The search team used a so-called ping detector to detect signals from the black box and used a remotely operated underwater vehicle to retrieve it. The box is crucial to understanding why the brand new Boeing aircraft could crash in clear weather. Earlier reports of the fuselage being found have now proven to be false. Searchers have confirmed that a 20-metre-long object turned out to be a shipwreck. The Tourism Minister is confident the Tiaki promise, a new plan to get visitors to behave better, will work, despite no clear plan in place to measure its effectiveness. The initiative, launched this afternoon, asks travellers to experience the country in a way that keeps everyone safe, protects the environment and respects culture. Kelvin Davis told Checkpoint such campaigns had worked overseas and would work in New Zealand too.
We've had issues around responsible camping. We'd like to think that those issues are resolved. We'd like to think that the feedback that we receive from people, the mood of the nation when we do those sorts of surveys, that we have positive results from all those different indicators that the tourism sector use to measure its performance.
Tourism Minister Kelvin Davis. There's no actual physical pledge. Organisations plan to spread the word mainly via the web, a social media hashtag and an in-flight video on Air New Zealand. Letting fees will now become a thing of the past, with Parliament passing legislation doing away with them today. The change will take effect from December the 12th. The Housing Minister, Phil Twyford, says the new law could put up to $47 million back into the pockets of Kiwi families each year. He says the law was changed in time to give tenants a break before the country enters the summer rental season, when many tenancies turn over. The cause of a fatal collision between a bus and a car on a South Island tourist route may be unclear for days. One person died when the small tourist bus operating out of Christchurch and the rental car collided this morning on State Highway 6 near Kingston. 10 people were injured, one critically. Most have now been released from hospital. The Otago Lakes Central Area Commander, Olaf Jensen, says the crash occurred on a straight stretch of road, which should be safe. He says officers are speaking to witnesses and inspecting the scene to piece together what happened.
Our roads are different. It's going to take time to get to your destination, so you actually have to ensure that you're not rushing, you leave plenty of time. There's patience on our road. There are a number of different road users out there. If you abide by the road rules, don't take risks. It's all about getting to your destination safely.
Inspector Jensen says the cause might not be known for a couple of days. The police want to hear from anyone who saw the crash. The power lines company Vector has put its crews on standby after Met Service warned of wind gusts up to 110 kilometres per hour in Auckland tonight. Vector says it's preparing to respond as quickly as possible if there are any power cuts. Met Service's marine forecast has gale warnings in place for the Manukau Harbour and Waitemata Harbour this evening. It's 6:05. Sport, the All Blacks halfback Te Toiroa Tuhuroirangi can't wait to start his first test. The team's third choice, number 9, Tahuriorangi, will start against Japan on Saturday with Aaron Smith and TJ Perenara, part of the 22-man group who have already headed for the UK. Although the team's top 2 halfbacks weren't in contention for selection, Tahuriorangi says it won't diminish how special a test start will be.
They don't really give out jerseys that easy, so for me to get the nod, it's something special and something I'll always hold forever. And Steve always tells us the reason why you've been picked is because you're a good footy player. For him to say those kind of things, it just makes you take the weight off your shoulder. Just for me to get out there and show the world what I got, and that's just me nailing my role.
Te Toiroa Tahuriorangi. The White Ferns captain Amy Satterthwaite says being swept in their series against Australia last month means complacency won't be an issue for her side at the Women's World T20 cricket tournament. In what was the White Ferns' last official series before the World T20 in the West Indies, New Zealand were well beaten in all 3 games by their Trans-Tasman rivals. The Kiwi side depart tonight before opening their campaign against India and Guyana next Saturday, and Satterthwaite is hopeful the 3 losses to Australia have done her team plenty of good.
You never like to lose and you never like to not perform up to what you think you can, but it's probably been a really good reminder just to push us on, just to ensure that we're really focusing on those key elements and make sure that we're then ready for the World Cup.
White Ferns captain Amy Satterthwaite. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, Alison Balance looks at efforts to clean up the waterways flowing into Porirua Harbour. This week's cultural ambassador, Fergus Barrowman, has some fresh new jazz releases, well, fresher than the water flowing into Porirua Harbour. And our window on the world asks, what is it like to be married to a chef? Forever stuck on dishes duty. Join me, Brian Crump, from After the News at 7 on RNZ National.
Met Service weather through to midnight tomorrow for all of the North Island. Strong and showers and strong southerlies today. Some of the showers heavy with hail and thunderstorms possible. Showers becoming isolated this evening and retreating to the east coast. Mainly fine tomorrow. A few morning showers about the east coast and isolated afternoon showers in Taranaki and Taumaranui. For Marlborough and Nelson, a few showers clearing this evening and becoming mainly fine. Bulla, Westland and Fiordland mainly fine today. Isolated showers in Fiordland. Showers spreading northwards tomorrow morning, then turning to rain in Fiordland in the afternoon and Westland in the evening. Canterbury, Otago and Southland, fine spells, however scattered showers in Southland spreading elsewhere this afternoon, some heavy with thunderstorms possible in North Otago. Becoming fine tonight but high cloud increasing tomorrow, bringing scattered rain from evening. And for the Chatham Islands, cloudy periods with showers tomorrow. It's 6:08 and you're listening to Checkpoint.
Thanks, Katrina. A significant announcement promised by the Tourism Minister today turned out to be a brochure and a video encouraging visitors to protect New Zealand. The Tiaki Care for New Zealand pledge, and I have a copy of it here if you're watching, it encourages New Zealanders and visitors to experience the country in a way that keeps everyone safe, protects the environment and respects culture. But what does that actually mean? Minister for Tourism, Calvin Davis, says the concept is designed to encourage tourists to modify their behaviour in accordance with New Zealand values.
It's about caring for our environment, it's about travelling safely, and it's about respecting culture.
So what does it all actually mean? What are you wanting people to do specifically?
Well, so when we have visitors arrive, and even New Zealanders travelling around the country, we want them to buy into this concept that we're looking after our environment, we're looking after our people, we're looking after each other as we travel and drive, making sure that we show compassion towards each other. It's about making sure that visitors here have a great experience in New Zealand, and that we look after our greatest asset, and that's the country.
Are you being a bit too subtle with it? Do you need to not spell things out like, you know, don't defecate on the side of the road, don't drop rubbish, drive on the correct side of the road? You know, wouldn't it be better to be a bit more instructive?
I think that would actually be quite off-putting for people. We want them to come here and experience, you know, what's great about New Zealand, and we want to just be a bit more subtle about the messages. I think people get that. You know, it's about signing up to New Zealand's values. The word Tiaki is obviously a unique word to Maori and us in New Zealand, meaning to care and look after people and the environment. So, you know, advertising campaigns need to just be a bit more caring than don't defecate on the side of the road, as he said.
Yeah, the thing is, your press release says that you're going to actively encourage travellers, local and overseas, to sign up to this pledge. How are you going to do that? How are you going to actively promote it?
Well, it's not about actually signing on a bit of paper. So Air New Zealand will have information in flight. There'll be the eyesights around the country. THL, Tourism Holdings Limited, their customers, their clients will have information given to them. So there'll be a whole heap of ways that the messages will be gotten out. But like I say, you know, this is about educating and encouraging our visitors to New Zealand and New Zealanders as we travel around the country. It's not about wagging the finger at people and basically putting them off from wanting to travel.
So it's going to be on websites and an in-flight video and some brochures. That's what it'll be?
Active encouragement. We're encouraging people to hashtag Tiaki Promise, and you know there's a number of ways that we'll be encouraging businesses, the tourism sector, everyone to spread the word about the Tiaki Promise and making sure that our visitors have the best experience and leave New Zealand, you know, in the way it was when they arrived here.
So what ways? What other ways are you going to be actively encouraging people?
Well, like I said, information that eyesights, there'll be apps that are developed. There's information that the tourism sector will distribute the information to people. Look, this is a positive thing, Lisa. This is positive for New Zealand. It's going to encourage our visitors. It's going to encourage New Zealanders as we visit, you know, to have a great experience and to care for our environment and to care for each other as they travel.
And we've had some feedback from Viv, who says perhaps we should have taught Tiaki to Kiwis first. Few hold those values based on the filth that is dumped around our country. We wanted to find out also what tourists coming to New Zealand think about the Tiaki Promise. So our reporter Alex Perrottet and camera operator Claire Easton Farrelly went to Auckland Airport this afternoon to share the new campaign with tourists who had just arrived in the country.
Kia ora, welcome to New Zealand. This is the Tiaki Promise. You can take that and make sure you read it later on. Thank you. Kia ora, welcome to New Zealand. This is the Tiaki Promise. You've got to read that. Would you like one as well? Yeah, just keep an open mind, have a read. Excuse me, no mai haere mai o te motu. Can I ask you whether you have heard of the Tiaki Promise? I'm a New Zealand Tiaki Promise keeper. It's actually an oath that you should take as you're visiting New Zealand. Can I ask you whether you're a visitor to this country?
I am a visitor to this country.
Where are you from?
Australia.
Are you from Australia? Okay, just across the ditch, not a long way to come.
No.
But I don't know whether you expected to be confronted with this. Are you willing to take, this is very, very simple, there's just 3 promises to make today as you're coming into the country. Are you willing to do that?
Yeah, I promise.
Okay, it's very, very simple. All you need to do is just hold up your right hand. Just hold up your right hand like this.
Here we go.
Yeah, very, very simple. And just this hand on your heart. Very, very simple, okay? And then you just repeat after me what's called the Tiaki Promise, okay? So while travelling in New Zealand, I will. So repeat after me. While travelling in New Zealand, I will.
While travelling in New Zealand, I will.
You've got to get the country right first. Care for land, sea and nature, treading lightly and leaving no trace.
Care for land, sea and nature, treading lightly and leaving no trace.
Travel safely, showing care and consideration for all.
Travel safely, showing care and consideration for all.
Respect culture, travelling with an open heart and mind.
Respect culture, travelling with an open
heart and mind.
Tiaki means to care for people and place. The Tiaki Promise is a commitment to care for New Zealand, for now and for future generations.
You reckon it would be good if they gave this like in brochure format to tourists before they visit?
Yes, because they're messy.
They're messy?
Most of them, yeah.
Like what? What do they do?
Like, we've just come back from Cambodia and people just chuck shit out the window.
With overseas drivers and a lot of crashes going on the road and people dying in short term of time, I guess that's the main message government want to put on, to get especially the international visitors to understand this much better way.
I've already made the promise. I'm hoping you're going to make it very soon. And I know that you're a Kiwi, but you live in Australia. But what do you think the message is here from the government?
New Zealand is precious. Keep it that way.
And what do we think of tourists? And
we love them.
Yeah?
Yeah, and they're here. They're an asset, and they've got to learn to keep it beautiful.
Right, so what sort of behaviours have you been aware of that you think we might be trying to clamp down on here?
Littering, rubbish, spitting, all of the general things that sometimes tourists do. Swimming as well probably is a big one. Drownings, the oceans are quite dangerous.
Well, Be Prepared covers that.
All right, yeah. We drive on the left, that sort of thing.
I think that pretty well sums it all up for us, just to respect each other and respect the country.
Great. Well, I hope you do, and I hope you do travel with an open heart and mind. Are you ready to do that?
Yes, we are.
Okay. You are on your way and set to go. Thank you very, very much. Kia ora.
Thank you. Kia ora.
Travel safely, showing care and consideration for
all.
Going.
We're done.
You're done?
Yeah, we're done.
I
stayed for a long time.
Okay, you did very well. You did very well. Thank you.
Alex Perrottet there at Auckland Airport. The death of journalist Jamal Khashoggi is putting Saudi Arabia under increasing international pressure. Today that pressure grew even more as Turkey released graphic details of the investigation into his murder. It says the 59-year-old was choked to death immediately after entering the Saudi consulate in Istanbul on October the 2nd. The new revelations have also renewed pressure on countries like the UK, who trade arms with Saudi Arabia. The UK's Foreign Secretary Jeremy Hunt has faced a grilling in London and been forced to justify his country's apparent continuing support for Saudi. The BBC's Mark Lowen reports.
His murder has captivated and shocked, drawn demands for justice and shaken relations with Saudi Arabia. Now the truth is emerging about Jamal Khashoggi's end after entering its Istanbul consulate. It comes as Saudi Arabia's public prosecutor leaves after fruitless talks here, Turkish sources saying he was more interested in learning what evidence they had. In a statement, his Turkish counterpart said no concrete results were achieved and confirmed for the first time details of the murder. Jamal Khashoggi was choked to death immediately after entering the Consulate General of Saudi Arabia in Istanbul, it reads. The victim's body was dismembered and destroyed following his death by suffocation. So Mr. Khashoggi's remains may never be found. The Saudis still haven't said where they were disposed of. The Turkish authorities are growing increasingly frustrated with the lack of cooperation by Saudi Arabia as to what really went on here. Riyadh has now rejected Turkey's extradition request for the 18 Saudis arrested there. So that is what has driven today's public statement, anger at the sense of a cover-up by the Saudi state. Turkey wants its Western allies to toughen their line. Today, Jeremy Hunt defended his response, but said Britain needed considered action, given commercial ties with Riyadh.
The Khashoggi murder is incredibly shocking, and I made it very clear that if the press stories were true, and it appears increasingly likely that they are true, then what happened would be completely contrary to our values.
Layers of the truth in this story are being unwrapped, but what lies at the core, staining the Saudi kingdom, may never be exposed.
Mark Lowen in Istanbul. The jury in the trial of the man accused of murdering South Auckland mother Arishma Chand has heard he told a friend he'd kill her and her ex-husband. Ms Chand was found stabbed to death in her Porirua home on the 12th of November last year. Rohit Deepak Singh is on trial in the Auckland High Court after pleading not guilty to murdering the 24-year-old woman. Our court reporter Annika Smith filed this report.
What he said was, you know, he's had enough. He was, how can I say it? Kill, yeah.
It's going to kill her?
Kill them.
Them?
Yeah.
So just to be precise, what word did he use?
I'm going to kill them.
That was David Chand, Mr Singh's friend, telling Crown Prosecutor Jelena Jelavic about a conversation the pair had in April 2017.
When you were talking to him or listening to him, did he show you anything on his body?
Yes, he just ripped his shirt off and showed me a tattoo that I don't know if he got it that day, but it looked pretty fresh. And he said that this is how much I love her and this is what it means to me. He was pretty aggro on that.
The Crown's case has been that the 42-year-old was an obsessed ex-boyfriend whose relentless infatuation drove him to kill her. The pair ended their sexual relationship in August 2016. She had fallen pregnant but got an abortion and broke up with Mr Singh. Friends and family have told the court he intended to marry Miss Chand and was heartbroken after the rejection. In cross-examination, it was revealed that the Hindi word for kill was the same as hit. Mr Singh's lawyer, Belinda Sellers, put this to Mr Chand.
So this word, maro, it can also be said with a kind of casual intention, like big talk not meaning anything. Is that correct?
Depends what it comes out of a person's heart. Depends what the feeling is, you know.
Today the jurors were also presented with a thick booklet detailing messages Mr Singh sent Miss Chand following the breakup. They were read aloud by Detective Sean Winstanley in court.
Today I really miss you all alone. One day you will realise what I'm going through when you come to my age. What goes around comes around.
On the 25th of November 2016, he sent her a text telling her he'd moved on.
Hi, I have moved on in my life. Thanks for everything. I won't be bothering you.
But the messaging continued the next day.
26 November 2016, 4:07 p.m. Hi, I saw you in mall, 4:07 p.m. Looking hot. At 10:55 p.m, a phone call with the duration 0.
2.5 months later, he told her he would never give up.
12:21:13 a.m. Happy Valentine to you. You know what, your ring always remains me. You know what people say things about you, but I know you very well. I want to tell you something every day. I think about you every day. I talk you with your photo. I feel like you are with me all the time. I know I have lost you, but I will never lose hope when I see you.
The trial before Justice Powell and a jury is set down for 4 weeks. Atuiti ko te mātua ko Annika Smith tēnei.
What's in a name? Well, it can hold history, mana, identity. But what if a name is lost in translation? Then that era is enshrined in more than 150 years of bad habit and in some cases modern-day prejudice. That's the reality for many Maori names, place names in Otago, itself an anglicised te reo name. So is it time to right these historical wrongs? Our Otago Southland reporter Timothy Brown reports.
Kura or something like that.
Te Kurau, Te Kurau, Tokurau, Toharu, Te Kourau.
Te Kohurau. No.
They're attempting to say Te Kohuro. If it sounds like they're struggling, it's because they are. The place they are referring to is called Kurau, the home of Richie McCaw. Like many places in Otago, Kurau started as a best attempt by settlers to pronounce a Maori name. But these best attempts were anglicised, and through history have descended into words bearing no resemblance to English or modern te reo. Many locals didn't even realise Kurau had Māori links. But it's not an isolated case, as Waihola, Wakatipu, Napara, and even Otago itself show. So how did these errors arise?
I guess there's layers upon layers of corruption, if you like, of the language, and give a bit of have a bit of empathy for the early settlers who were trying to get their head around some of these nuances of the language, having not come across the Polynesian languages before. It's not a stretch to understand how Otako becomes Otago.
That's Te Runanga or Otako representative Tahu Portaki. While he has sympathy for the historical errors of Pakeha, he says now, with a modern standardised te reo alphabet, it's time to begin correcting them.
I think it's, the time's come. There's no reason why we shouldn't be adhering to an orthographic convention.
That begs the question how and where to start. One answer may lie in the example of Whakatipu. The lake, which lends its name to the basin surrounding Queenstown, has long been spelled Wakatipu, the local dialect causing issues for early settlers. But the addition of the H, something which caused so much angst in Whanganui, is already creeping into use with the Department of Conservation's Whakatipu Wildlife Trust utilising the correct spelling without issue. Even Queenstown Lake's Mayor, Jim Bolt, supports a transition to the correct orthography over time. So how does Waitaki District Mayor Gary Kircher feel about correcting historical te reo errors such as Kurau?
I think over time, we are getting this evolution of recognition and of acceptance that, there's an alternative there. But, I think it would be a mistake to just try and foist that, in a very short time frame onto all of the community.
Mr. Kircher says for many, conventions such as Kurau are so ingrained it's impossible to imagine changing. But Waitaki locals told Checkpoint it is education and fear, not recent history, which prevents them.
I would have a go so long as everyone realised that I was having a go, and I wouldn't be perfect first time.
Right, so there are nerves around judgment for getting it wrong?
Yeah, more the fact I don't want to offend anyone by getting it wrong.
Dunedin Mayor and Local Government New Zealand President Dave Cull says he is supportive of recognising traditional te reo names, and he wants iwi to lead that conversation. He says acceptance and use of the language is far greater today than it was even a decade ago, and that will continue to evolve.
A number of ways that te reo Māori will be incorporated and normalised and celebrated. And it'll happen at schools, it'll happen in political speeches, it'll happen all over the place. And I think that we'll find that in 5 to 10 years, that will be a totally different situation.
So with an appetite for change and support from local Māori, has the time come to resign historical errors to the past? Kei o tākou ahau, mō te hōtaka o te ahi nei, ko Timothy Brown tēnei.
Donald Trump's name may not be on the ballot, but next week's midterm elections in the US will act as a referendum on his unconventional first 2 years in office. All 435 members of the House of Representatives are up for election, as are a third of the 100 Senate seats. Key to the Democrats' hopes of winning back the House of Representatives could be the votes of suburban women. In states like New Jersey, they're mobilising. But as the BBC's Nick Bryant went to find out, will that enthusiasm carry over to the ballot box?
It's in the suburbs of America's major cities that the battle for the House of Representatives is being fought. Residential havens like the 11th District of New Jersey. where this time of year the houses are festooned with phantoms and the lawns are studded with placards.
These ones are really heavy.
Let's try to lift one.
And amidst all the pumpkin, an emergent pink wave of female activists who've never before been involved in politics.
Okay.
Erin Chung used to work for the Trump Organization, but now heads up a women's group trying to turn this Republican seat Democrat.
Across the board, Democrat and Republican women are just sick of his misogynistic comments about women. They're sick of the way that he treats women like second-class citizens, and they're ready to do something about it.
Donald Trump remains popular amongst the blue-collar voters who helped win him the presidency, but there's a lot of white-collar discontent in the suburbs about his tone and his style. Amongst more affluent voters, amongst more highly educated voters, and especially amongst female voters. When Democrats gathered to canvass this neighbourhood, 3/4 of the volunteers were women.
So there are 3 people here that we need to talk to.
Eleanor Siegel comes from a Republican family and has voted Republican in the past, but not this time. You're saying you're angry?
Yeah, very angry.
Does Trump anger you?
Does Trump anger me? I think I've gotten past that. It's beyond anger. He motivates me.
Before the Navy let me fly one of these, I had to pass a lot of tests.
The Democrats are fielding a record-breaking number of female candidates. Here it's Mikey Sherrill, a former Navy helicopter pilot. And at a time when the party is moving to the left, they've tried to field moderates in these Republican-held seats.
Get the job done.
But this race, like so many others, is close, and at this Republican rally for their congressional candidate, female voters were untroubled by the president's often insulting behaviour towards women.
I have no problem with Donald Trump. I love Donald Trump, and that's why I'm here today.
I support him. I support him 100%.
And that's Checkpoint for this evening. We will catch you tomorrow.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. The Immigration Minister Ian Lees-Galloway is feeling the heat over a decision to grant residency to a Czech drug smuggler. The country's biggest fuel retailer is rejecting claims it's making excessive profits or fleecing consumers. Auckland public health officials have closed a public spa pool after it tested positive for the bacteria that causes Legionnaire's disease. And powerline workers in Auckland are standing by to respond to damage from gale force winds forecast to hit tonight. Our next news and weather is at 7.
This Saturday morning, Lee Child on his enigmatic hero Jack Reacher, who's about to take to the small screen, I think. I don't know who's going to play him. Won't be Tom Cruise. We'll talk to the winner of this year's Walters Prize, usually a reliable source of art